Hello, thank you for accessing the overview to Hennepin County Services Guidebook. This information is provided as an example of how you could use the guidebook in many ways. The background for development of the guidebook was that around 2019, there were focus groups of operated and contracted case managers that were gathered to determine what staff needed more support on and more information on. These items were prioritized. It was decided that we would develop a manual versus having ongoing in-person training, and the manual would be updated ongoing at least every 6 months. The committee worked in groups of expertise, smaller groups, to submit information related to their area of expertise and provide that as resources to the guidebook. A few slides on how to find the Hennepin County Guidebook. First, you want to go to the Operations Manual on SharePoint. Then scroll down to H for housing. When you find housing, click on that, and you should be able to open the guidebook. It's a guidebook that's been developed for the first stop for answers to your housing questions. Resources are linked for direct connections or more detail. Or you can click on a link, and when you click on the link, the guidebook will come up. We can provide that link to you. The next few slides will explain in more detail how to use this resource. There's several examples on several slides. This guidebook has been developed as a first stop to answer your housing questions. Resources are linked for direct connections for more detail. If you need more individual assistance, subject matter experts are also included in the document as well. There's video icons located throughout the guide to identify video links for a deeper explanation. C wanted to learn more about the service family training and counseling and how to pay for person-centered planning services. You'd find that resource under Chapter 2. Maybe you're wanting to look up a provider to see if they offer a specific service through the waiver. You might want to use DHS Licensing Lookup tool, which is located in Chapter 3, as well as other tools like the Hennepin County Housing Link and MinnesotaHelp.info. Maybe you're learning about funding streams or moving expenses. And so you would find that information about transition services in Chapter 5. Or you wanted to watch a video on housing and homelessness on a YouTube video, you'd find that information in a detailed video in Chapter 7. So the first example, learning how family training and counseling can pay for person-centered planning services in Chapter 2. If you go to Chapter 2, you'll see a link to family training and counseling. You'll also see other links to regional listing for person-centered planning facilitators, frequently asked questions about formal person-centered planning, etc. When you click on the link, it'll go to the Disability Services Program Manual and give you a more detailed explanation of family counseling and training, as well as the services that are offered and the details about how to authorize the service. If you go further into family counseling and training, one of the sections talks more specifically about person-centered planning facilitation and what the requirements are. There's also a fact sheet you can link to about person-centered planning. Check to see if a specific provider offers waivered services through DHS Licensing Lookup. So in Chapter 3, one of the resources are several tools that you could use. Using housing resource guides, the following tools can help you locate appropriate housing. DHS Licensing Lookup, Healthcare Facilities Search, and MinnesotaHelp.info. So if you clicked on DHS Licensing Lookup, the following page would come up. You can see they're asking you to enter a name of a provider if you have it. If you don't have it, you don't have to enter it. The city you might be looking at, the county that you might be looking at. You don't have to enter the city if you're entering the county. Zip code, you don't have to enter that if you have the county. The licensing type, there's several licensing type listed: waiver, mental health supports, day services, etc. So find that one and press search. So one of the examples is home and community-based services, community residential setting. When you click on that, all the home and community-based services within that area that you searched, whether it's Hennepin County or Minneapolis or Champlin, would come up. If the license is open and valid, it's in blue. If it is closed or under advisement, it would be brown. Chapter 5 talks about learning about funding streams for moving expenses. In Chapter 5, there's a great service called Transitional Services, a service that can pay for items and expenses necessary and reasonable for the person to transition from an eligible setting to their own home or an integrated community support setting, which could include moving expenses, moving services, as well as damage deposits and purchase of new household items. So if you click on Transitional Services, the SharePoint site will also give a link to the Community-Based Services Manual. And when you reach the link, it'll talk about transitional services. And under the area of covered services, you'll learn all kinds of surprising things that you can pay for: essential furniture, household supplies, rent deposits, moving expenses, pest and allergen treatment of the home, which is really helpful in many situations. Utility setup and deposits, window coverings, and these are things that have often been historically really hard to find payment for. Chapter 7, there's a video about housing and homelessness on YouTube. This is a really comprehensive video, a really helpful video, and it can really be another way to learn things. I'm going to review the guidebook by chapter, giving you some highlights of each chapter just to kind of go into a little more depth. Chapter 1, the guidebook, the introduction. It's a general introduction to housing guidebook. It explains the video features. It defines long-term services and support housing council group and the group email, which we'll explain later in the presentation. And it reminds people that since 1997, we've had community informational sessions available for the general public, for people that you serve, that you assess, that you work with, that have open cases or not. They don't have to be from Hennepin County even, or county case managers as well, or county staff. Information about guardianship, supported decision making, transition services, housing, vocational services, consumer support grant, family support grant, just a number of topics. And that booklet is located at hennepin.us/CMTYSUPPORT. Hennepin.us CMTYSUPPORT. General case management information in Chapter 1 from the Community-Based Services Manual. Chapter 1 has links to the Community-Based Services Manual from DHS, and it provides details about DHS's expectations of the waiver, alternative care, and essential community support services and best practices. Helpful information can be found in the areas of the definition and also details about covered and non-covered services. Chapter 2, staying aware of the person's housing status needs. And so this section focuses on person-centered planning resources as well as how to find them. It provides suggestions for person-centered thinking tools that can be used to gather more information and examples. It provides information on how to fund a person-centered plan through family counseling. And it highlights some waiver and non-waiver supports to be considered as well. So that can be really helpful. It may help the case manager to proactively plan with a person that they are serving before something might escalate to something more serious or a crisis. Chapter 3, housing types and where to find services. As a case manager or a person receiving services, it can often be a challenge to keep up with things and learn the different names that are being created. To help us, there's a housing matrix that you can link to. It's intended for case managers to use when evaluating various housing supports and determining whether to pursue one setting over another setting. It contains a list of subject matter experts as well in various areas. There's reference to how to pay for the housing, how to pay for food support, or Minnesota Supplemental Aid or Minnesota Supplemental Aid Housing Assistance or Housing Support. It includes some of the tools like the Hennepin Housing Key, DHS Licensing Lookup, and Community Residential Service Openings as well. There's information on the moratorium and corporate foster care and considerations for trying to develop a community residential setting considering the moratorium if there's a need for an exception. Chapter 4, Working with Providers. This is a really helpful section to help understand versus service authorization processes through the ever popular 6790 form. It also links to customized living documents that are in process of being revised. Again, we will be reviewing this manual every 6 months, so anything that's been revised or changed will be reflected in the new manual and posted on SharePoint at the same address. It is posted as one document, so any other documents will be automatically updated because it's web-based. Chapter 5, Assisting with Moving Logistics. That can be really stressful for a person you're working with if they have to move. There's a lot of expenses, but there's a listing of potential resources here about transitional services, emergency assistance, emergency general assistance, information on coordinating benefits, and linking to the combined application form where people can apply for food support or MSA, Minnesota Supplemental Aid, or MSA housing assistance or cash benefits as well. And there's also a link to a My Move plan, which is a person-centered tool to help people think about their moving process. Chapter 6, following up after the move. So we're not done after a person moves. We just can't say, okay, we'll see you later. Have a great rest of the year. We want to follow up with them. There's certain required meetings depending on the service they are authorized. And some of the meetings are 45-day meetings. Some meetings might be 90 days, etc., depending on the type of services. There's also considerations for updating SSIS, the state system, and coordinating bus cards and other supports the person may have had in their other location so they continue in their new location. Chapter 7, Crisis and Emergency Housing, Assisting People who are experiencing homelessness. This section is very rich. It's one of my favorite sections because it includes a lot of detailed resources on homelessness. There's a detailed video that one of our staff, Lisa, developed that's really, really good. There's a review, a comprehensive list of homelessness prevention services. You can find out about crisis housing. There's a list of homeless shelters with lots of details about how to contact them, and lists including programs that are not waivered services as well as ones that are waiver supports. And you can also learn about veterans housing. When we were developing this guidebook, we also thought about an email consultation group. We want it to be as helpful as possible. The group is made up of supervisors, assessors, case managers, all who would provide support through email. They help us to understand the differences between housing options, consult on challenging housing situations, and provide updates on changes to statuses and rules relating to housing. We want you to contact your team first for questions or your supervisor first before accessing this group. But once you've done that, you're welcome to access the consultation group and see what they have to provide as far as resources. We're going to go through an example of one of the questions that was recently submitted so far to the group. We developed a housing email consultation group, and this was an example of one of the questions that came through the group. The contracted case manager team received a consult regarding the individual on the developmental disabilities waiver who previously lived in their parents' home for 24 years. And the community residential setting or group home placement they're currently in was being terminated. The parents have appealed the termination, and the service termination and the contracted case manager are in the middle of that process. However, they're also struggling to find an appropriate placement for the person who has very high medical needs and high behavioral needs. Often you'll see that people that come through the consultation group are not typical folks. They have more challenges and maybe harder to serve. So looking at other resources or other people's ideas can be really helpful. They asked us to review the person's service needs below, which I included in the next slide, and offer suggestions. So this is an example of what we received. This is a person, he's 25 years old. He needs total care. He is deaf and hard of hearing. He has high medical needs, including trach care, regular suctioning, frequent medical concerns about kidney stones happen regularly and very painful. He uses oxygen occasionally. He has a seizure disorder, a feeding tube, as well as autism, and a history of physical aggression against staff, including throwing objects, hitting, kicking, breaking his toys, his DVD player, and phones, etc. So he's he needs a lot of support. What do you think you would do in the situation? What might the supports look like? What would you be considering? Who would you ask? How would you start? Where would you go in the guidebook maybe to find out? So our response was from one of the folks, maybe homeward bound. The need for oxygen and trach suctioning seems to be more than a regular developmental disabilities waiver site would offer. Maybe ACR homes was suggested as they handle high medical and physical needs. Homeward bound, etc. Main site is an intermediate care facility with nurses 24/7 and does the same, has same homes with 24-hour nursing that are waivered sites. So they're not sure what other places might have 24/7, but there may be more. Some other people on the email consultation group suggested some programs for the deaf and blind supports and a list of providers who had a history of serving those with challenging behavior. So that was helpful input for the person and hopefully gave them a little more direction. Thank you for listening to the video today. If you have any questions, please contact your supervisor, and we'll look forward to seeing you in other videos. Thanks.